how I'd learn Indigenous culture if I were just starting. I know a lot of people are wanting to learn about Indigenous culture but don't know where to start. In this video, I'm going to show you the best way to start learning about Indigenous culture, whether you're just discovering about your Indigenous heritage and background, or maybe you're a non-Indigenous person and you're wanting to become an ally and learn respectfully about Indigenous culture and heritage. So this is 6 ways that I would learn about Indigenous culture and heritage if I were just starting from scratch today. Before this episode starts, I have a small favor to ask from you. 89% of people who watch this channel don't subscribe. So if you've ever liked any of the videos we've posted, if you like this channel, can you please do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button? It helps the channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the better we can together make an impact towards Indigenous truth and reconciliation. Thank you and enjoy this episode. The first way that I would learn about Indigenous culture if I were just starting today is I would first and foremost, I would begin with my background. By my background, I mean my family's background. So for all of you watching, learn about your family's heritage first. Whether you are of Indigenous background and trying to discover your family's heritage and learn more about yourself and your family's history, or if you are non-Indigenous and you're trying to become an ally, learn about where you come from first. Your family's worldviews, cultural beliefs, traditions, what is important to you first. It's always really, really valuable to begin with yourself and learn about where you come from and your starting point, whether it's your Indigenous side, your non-Indigenous side, or if you have no Indigenous cultural background whatsoever and you're completely a settler identity, what is it that your heritage or your own Indigenousness, wherever you come from, is special to you? And what is it that is interesting and that you know about so far? Now, why is it so important to learn about yourself first? Well, it's important because it will allow you to have a starting point to be able to reflect on what makes you you. And also, if you are approaching Indigenous people or friends or acquaintances that you want to learn from, it will allow you to bring that foundation of who you are to those conversations so that you have those reference points to share when you're asking questions to other people and expecting them to share in return. It can also allow you to have broader insights as to what cultural beliefs are and what it feels like to look into your family's traditions and heritage. Okay, so it's really, really valuable to begin with asking your parents or your grandparents about their experiences, where your ancestors come from. You could do a DNA test, you could do any other ancestral tests or research that can help you to maybe have a scientific background or blood lineage proof as to where your family comes from and what regions of the world that makes you you, right? So that's the first thing that I would do. The first way I would begin learning about Indigenous culture is start with yourself, where you come from, what's special about you and your family's history, okay? The second way that I'd learn about Indigenous culture is to ask yourself what is meaningful and interesting to you as an individual. What is aligned with your current passions and interests? This is just asking yourself, what are you interested in and love and passionate about now? Whatever you're gonna learn about in relation to Indigenous culture needs to align with what you already like and what you're already interested in. That's gonna allow your educational journey to be more natural and to be more stronger and easily sustained as if you're already naturally interested in the subject matter that you're learning about, right? So whether it's music, arts, politics, entertainment, movies, whatever you're really passionate about spending your time learning about or doing, or activities that are really meaningful to you, reflect on that and see where there are learning opportunities that correlate to Indigenous cultural knowledge as well. Now, why it's important for you to ask yourself what you are already passionate about? Well, for me, I want you to be successful in learning about what Indigenous culture is all about and how you can integrate Indigenous cultural knowledge in your day-to-day life. Now, are there certain teachings that resonate with you more than others? You might not even know what teachings there are to choose from yet. That's why it's really important for you to reflect on what you really like. So for me personally, when I was beginning on my journey of really learning and discovering all about Indigenous cultural teachings, I reflected on the fact that I really, really love personal development and growth and psychology and productivity, all those nerdy things that can help you to achieve your goals and be better at your job and school and learning and all that fun stuff. Now, because my passions were really deeply rooted into personal development and personal growth, I was able to apply apply and find those deep passions in teachings that were able to really get me momentum on my Indigenous cultural learning journey, because I was already interested in themes around personal growth and happiness and balance that led me to the medicine wheel and learning about 7 grandfather teachings, learning about smudging. All of those things were really deeply rooted in what I already was passionate about. Let me know in the comments what some of your deepest passions are, and I will respond to your comments with what I think would be a really good place for you to start in learning about Indigenous culture. Now, number 3, the third way that I would learn about Indigenous culture if I was just starting would be to connect with other people who are in the same interest groups. Now, what this is all about is finding communities. So finding communities that will allow you to learn from other people, share your experiences, and also to feel that connection as you are going on your experience of learning Indigenous culture and learning about the different cultural practices that are new to you. It's really important to connect with other people because it gives you the sense of community that will keep you going when you're feeling either discouraged, or if you encounter a problem, or you're feeling set back about not learning something that you wanted to. It's really, really helpful to have the support of other people who are on a similar journey to you, and people you can listen to and learn from, and also to be able to share your experiences and your struggles and not feel alone in that. Now, there are virtual online communities and in-person groups that you can join. It's just a matter of choosing what is right for you. So if you are someone of Indigenous background and you're trying to connect with other people who are also Indigenous and you want that connection of fellow and Native person, there are friendship centers in urban areas, there's First Nation communities. Wherever it's most applicable and feels right for you, it will be a great place for you to meet other people. And if you are of non-Indigenous background and you're trying to connect with other allies who are also trying to learn about Indigenous culture from a place of respect, there are other online communities and in-person communities in your organization, extracurricular environments where you can connect and learn from other people. I highly, highly recommend it. Now, for me personally, there's groups that I have found the most success and community in. It doesn't necessarily have to be really, really focused on Indigenous culture. Sometimes it can be Indigenous business groups or business groups that are really focused on cultural diversity, not necessarily just Indigenous. You can also connect with other communities where there's a strong focus on sports or extracurriculars that will be helpful for you to meet other people that have similar interests to you, where you can form that connection and build a relationship so you can have that support and listen to other people who are on the same journey and just expedite your learning process, right? Okay, now on to the fourth way. So the fourth way that I would learn about Indigenous culture if I were just starting out, I would be really, really aware of not listening to the negativity. You really have to learn to tune out that negative noise. There's going to be a lot of noise, a lot of negative words coming out of people's mouth, like don't do this, don't do that, no, no, no. And that is something that can really set you back if you're just starting out on your journey of learning Indigenous culture. Negativity will absolutely, absolutely set you back. I've seen this firsthand. I've experienced it a lot in my childhood, my teenage years, adult life, yesterday. It's really, really common to experience negativity and just overall negative energy towards Indigenous cultural learning. And I'll talk about why that is at the very end of this video, but it's really important to not listen to that negative noise. How this has looked for me personally is myself and other friends of mine have attended Indigenous ceremonies like sunrise ceremonies and full moon ceremonies. There would be an elder or a knowledge keeper present who would have these really strict guidelines or protocols for that particular ceremony and be so strict in communicating those guidelines and protocols to the people that were attending that it scared off participants from coming back to participate in ceremony again. It's really important when you're a knowledge keeper or when you're facilitating cultural practices to be positive and empowering to your participants. It can be really off-putting to someone who is self-conscious and just starting out learning. They're so afraid to do the wrong thing that it's really important when you're starting to learn to find those positive spaces. So tune out the negative noise that you're going to hear. You're going to hear it, it's guaranteed, and it's just really important to listen and focus on the positive ones. The fifth way I'd learn about Indigenous culture if I were just starting out is I would be really mindful of my environment. I'd be really careful of who I'm surrounding myself with if I'm taking my Indigenous cultural learning journey seriously. Your environment is really important, so pay attention to it. I was really lucky that the schools that I attended growing up had a lot of international students, so I was exposed to diverse classmates from a very young age. This really allowed me to not feel like it was Indigenous versus non-Indigenous, right? It wasn't Native students versus white students. That wasn't my experience whatsoever. And I'm really, really grateful and lucky that that was my experience growing up. Now, this is important to pay attention to your environments because you're always going to find yourself in environments where there will be less diversity and there will be more segregation of either you being an Indigenous person and then the non-Indigenous people on the other side, or if you are of settler background, you being of settler background and being separated from the Indigenous folks and wanting to learn about the culture, right? It's really important to be aware of these differences and try to select higher levels of diversity in your crowds because there's going to be more exposure, more worldviews, and just more perspectives on what culture means and what can be learned and shared and brought to the table, and more differences and similarities of cultural meanings, cultural symbols, backgrounds, teachings, what is important in worldview and how people think and perspective. Attract yourself and find yourself in more diverse groups will help you with Indigenous cultural learning. The sixth way that I would learn Indigenous culture if I were just starting is I would continually reevaluate what success looks like. When I say success, I mean successfully learning something, right? You're never going to be done on your growth. You're never going to be completely an expert in Indigenous knowledge or in any knowledge for that matter. There's always more that you can learn and always going to be more that you can grow. So after you've gone through your initial experiences of learning about yourself, your background, the passions, those introductory teachings that are aligned with those passions, you've found yourself in groups and communities where you can learn from others and network with others, share your stories, hear stories. You've separated and got rid of all of the negativity. You're attracting those positive voices in your life. And then you're also being aware of how amazing it can be to focus on diverse groups. The last thing is re-evaluating. Constantly re-evaluate what a successful learning experience looks like, because when you're starting out on your journey of I want to learn Indigenous culture because I just found out I'm Indigenous, or if I want to learn about Indigenous culture because I am a settler and I want to be an ally and want to start learning this stuff, it's really important after you've already done a bunch of learning to then reevaluate what you want to learn next and what your own perceptions of what you just learned and how you can renew that experience, because you're going to want to go back to the drawing board of, okay, this is what I expected, now this is where I'm at and this is the knowledge that I have. And you're going to actually discover that there's so much more that you can take advantage of and that you can appreciate, whether it's more about Indigenous cultural teachings or Indigenous people or anything relating to Indigenous anything, or if it's other backgrounds, maybe it's not culturally related at all, maybe it's personal growth and wellness and technology and whatever it is that you want to learn next. Very important to reevaluate what it is that success looks like and what you initially thought. Because your definition of even culture could change completely, which is amazing, right? It's like amazing how you can have new realizations that will help you to expand your knowledge and expand your learning. For me personally, I started learning about symbols and meanings and the basics and wanting to learn more and more and more teachings and how they were interconnected. Focus was how many teachings, what is the broad, wide number of teachings that I can learn. That's what I initially had as my success point, as my goal, as my intention. That was my original goal when I was first wanting to learn and also share Indigenous cultural knowledge with other people. Quickly, I realized after I started learning the fundamentals of the teachings that really resonated with me, my idea of success quickly shifted to application, meaning how can I take the fundamentals of the teachings that I've learned thus far and apply them to new applications or new tools that can help people on their day-to-day living, and apply traditional teachings to everyday life to live a more balanced life, to achieve their goals and develop something new. All right, so I have one last bonus for you guys. This one's really, really important and I didn't want to leave it out. How I would learn about Indigenous culture if I were just starting out. This is a bonus, but it's also probably the most important, is I would understand how Canada's history, colonization and how generational trauma has created gatekeeping, and how gatekeeping affects so many people's journey to learning about Indigenous culture, including my own. It's really important for you to understand how gatekeeping has been created by the creation of this country, Canada's history, as well as colonization and generational trauma. In that order has caused gatekeeping to take place, where people are so afraid of sharing Indigenous cultural teachings and the fear of losing the cultural teachings to non-Indigenous people, and how that affects our psychology in order to feel like we need to protect the culture and teachings from people who might take it away from us. In the beginning of learning and sharing Indigenous cultural teachings online, I had a lot of negative messages from people on social media about sharing Indigenous cultural teachings online. There was a ton of hate messages, hate comments about sharing cultural teachings in an online space, whether it was video recording or photos. It shouldn't be shared for non-Indigenous people. If you haven't heard about gatekeeping before, watch this video right here that explains what gatekeeping is. The definition of gatekeeping is setting strict rules or restrictions for participating in something. In this case, it's Indigenous cultural learning, Indigenous cultural practices, or anything, whether you are less than 100% Indigenous bloodline, or if you're non-Indigenous person. Gatekeeping prevents people from accessing cultural resources, cultural knowledge, healing environments when they need it, when people could be healed or start on their healing journey by having access to these teachings, but they are afraid or they are shut out by gatekeepers, and it's a really sad thing to see. The reason it's important to understand how gatekeeping is created and how the colonization effects have caused this gatekeeping effect is because it allows you to understand why gatekeeping takes place, so that you can show empathy and compassion towards people that are positioning themselves as gatekeepers or preventing people from feeling welcome to learn and participate in Indigenous cultural practices. So that way you can have that knowledge to deal with those negative pushbacks against participating. So if I were just starting out learning about Indigenous culture, these are the ways that I would do that, and definitely finishing with that last bonus. Tribal trade is completely inclusive to anyone who wants to learn and participate in a respectful way, and comes from a place of respect, curiosity, joy, and gratitude and love, all of those good things. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you loved this video.